My name's Debbie Gottschalk. We're in Wilmington, Delaware, and I'm an attorney at Community Legal Aid Society. We're a nonprofit legal services program. We provide civil legal representation to people who are poor, elderly, or disabled. And I came here out of law school in June 1994. I went to law school. Actually, I got interested in law school working in homeless shelters in high school and college, and wanted to do something to help the people I was meeting, and it got the idea that my education was maybe a skill. Went to law school, and came out finding my dream job. I lived in Maryland, but when you'd go into town, you'd see people living on the street, and the contrast between Maryland and what I was seeing on the streets just was appalling and seemed wrong, and I wanted to do something. I went to SUNY Buffalo because it's known as a public interest school. It was in the single digits of people who actually went into public interest work upon graduating, but apparently that was a large percentage, unfortunately, of people in law school. So it being known as a public interest school, there was a great community of students who were interested in the same thing. As I got to law school, I found the local legal services program, began working there, and did some other organizing efforts. While I was in law school, I kind of kept, I like to say, kept me sane and helped me remember why I was putting myself through this law school experience in the first place, was it's so when I get out I can do these things. One of the first bills I worked on, pieces of legislation I worked on when I came to Delaware, was a bill that allowed people on welfare to get an education as a work activity. I started working here right as the welfare reform movement kicked in, and what we found in Delaware was people were being told to quit degree programs literally a month short of graduating, like with a nursing degree, and told to take the first minimum wage job they could find. And these were single moms with kids who needed to pay the rent and were feeling like they had no choice. So I worked with a university professor and some legislators, and we passed a law that made the state count the educational, either GED, high school, or secondary education, as a work activity. And the idea being you're still subject to the time limit. It didn't stop the time you had, but you could do that and count it towards the work hours you were required to do. And just this last spring, I was on a panel that a state child poverty task force was doing on, they were holding sessions around the state, and one of the panelists was a woman who had just completed her bachelor's degree. She's a parent of a 3-year-old, in 3 years, because that's now our time limit for welfare in Delaware, 3 years. She completed from start to finish her degree in 3 years because that law allowed her to count education as a work activity. I live by a philosophy in some ways that I can now, or work with a philosophy that I can now articulate, which is a very simply, you don't get if you don't ask. I use that on cases, I use it with elected officials, and it's amazing what people will actually do, if you just ask. I'll put on the internet. A crazy bill passed one time, and I just kept thinking there's no way anyone's going to do this, and had something sail through. We had a situation where we had to help relocate 100 tenants, families, from a complex that was in deteriorating condition, and worked out several special kind of creative arrangements to help people qualify for the housing assistance. And I was so thrilled that the folks, our clients, came through on their end and met what they needed to do But other people couldn't believe that I'd been able to work out these deals. And a lot of credit goes to the agency and office that was working with us and their willingness to take a chance. But I didn't say, well, that's the craziest idea, it'll never work. I said, well, it's a crazy idea, all they can do is say no. and it worked. And one of those families is one of the ones that calls me periodically and says, okay, this happened, am I doing the right thing if I do this? Yes, you are. Thank you for checking. Love it when people call the lawyer first, then do something, rather than the other way around.